Okay, so I know I haven't posted a video in a while. I haven't forgotten about this channel. What's going on is this right here, we're really getting into the core of the series. The most important material is right here. So I've been preparing this video for a while, and this is going to be a long one. I don't know how long it's going to take, but it's going to take as long as it needs to take because I normally try to keep the videos short, but all these ideas I've got to keep connected in the same video. So I guess the way I'll try to entice you to keep watching is, you know that scene at the end of The Matrix after Neo beats Agent Smith and he looks down the hall and he sees the other two agents standing there and he sees it all in machine code? Well, if you master the material in the next two videos, you're going to start to see politics with that level of clarity. So hopefully I can pull off the explanation clearly enough. So let's get started. Okay, so here's the glorious chart that we're going to be filling out. It's based off the Darwinian model I've been talking about throughout the series, so you can watch the previous videos if you want to catch up. But I want to add one more thing to that model before we get started, and it's a very important protocol that both sides understand, and that is you got to protect the women and children, right? So it's obvious why you protect the children because they are the entire next generation, but they can't fend for themselves, so you got to make sure they survive to adulthood. But you also got to protect the women too, and the reason for that is also obvious. It's because they are the limiting factor in the birth rate. That is, if you have a shortage of women, then you have a bottleneck in the birth rate, and that threatens the extinction of the tribe. So both sides understand this, but the reason I bring this up is that they actually come at it from two different perspectives, right? Because it's one thing to, as the men, to realize you need to protect the women and children, right? Someone other than yourself. But it's another thing to actually be in that matriarchy, which is to be the protected women and children. So even though they agree on what to do, they're two very different angles, right? So it's like when you take a girl on a date, right? Maybe you both had a good time, but that may not necessarily have the same meaning for both of you, right? Because you actually ponied up the investment. So the signal is clear to her that you're interested in her, but it's not quite as clear the other way. Did she have a good time because she likes you? Or it's because she liked the stuff you got her, right? I'm not trying to be cynical about the thing. I'm just saying that it's ambiguous because that same protocol leads to two, very different angles. So the top chart just lists out the different conditions that each paradigm operates under. I went into this a bit in part 3 of the series already, so hopefully that'll help this go a little smoother. But just to step through all the different issues, the first one is, how do the two sides view that big wide world out there? Well, if you think of it, back to the Darwinian model, you have the soft nucleus of the tribe, the women and children, being protected by the patriarchs, right? It's the men that go out and actually shield the women and children from the external environment. So it's the patriarchy that actually deals with that external environment. So they are going to see it for the Hobbesian, brutish world that it is. But how do the matriarchs view that same external world? Well, if the patriarchs were successful, then it doesn't exist to them. Out of sight, out of mind, right? That was the point. That's why the men did what they did, so that they could shield the women from this existence, right? But this is going to shape two very different views of the world if you're going to have these very opposite views of what things are like out there. And so then the next issue is the internal environment. How do the two sides see the internal environment, the society at large? This one's going to be kind of hard to explain here because it's actually kind of dependent on other things in the chart that we haven't filled out yet. But to suffice it to say for the moment that this is actually really the crux of where the two sides end up differing on what is often referred to as individualism versus collectivism. However, I'm not comfortable putting it in the chart exactly like that because I don't think it's quite accurate enough, but also I want to tie it into the Darwinian model. So to adjust on it really quick, Well, first of all, I'll specify that it's the left wing that is collectivist and the right wing that's more individualist. I'm sure you already knew that. But to qualify it a little more and to put it in that Darwinian model, the right actually sees, or rather, the individualist model is seen more accurately as a community of independent families, right? So you have kind of these you have these separate families that operate, maybe in cohesion under one society, but it's still overall that they operate independently. So that's really the idea of individualism, and this is a bit more accurate than pure atomized individualism, and this will also kind of diffuse the idea, the accusation that individualism is selfish, but it's just more accurate because when Dad goes to work, he's not doing it just to get a paycheck for himself. He's actually providing for his wife and kids. Same as when Mom goes to the grocery store, she's buying groceries for the whole family, right? So this is, in economic terms, it'll look like, if you zoom out, that these people are just in it for themselves, but actually it's more accurate to see it in terms of a family structure. And I say this I make this adjustment on good authority.
In almost any society, parents will have greater interest and greater concern about their children than any other group. We speak of our society as an individual society. It is not. It's a family society. The fundamental unit of our society is a family. It is the interest in the family that gives people an incentive to work, to save, to slave, to make sacrifices.
Meanwhile, how does the left view internal society? Well, it sounds similar, but it's actually radically different. They see it as one big family. That's what collectivism fundamentally is. If you want to translate it from just an abstract thought of just some group, if you want to translate it to something more meaningful, you think of taking the family dynamic and expanding it overall to broader society as one single family. Now, exactly this is kind of saying two different things at the same time, because in the Darwinian model, that may be a little more vague exactly how that works. But the point is that in the political sense, that homey dynamic has now been expanded. The left-wing politics fundamentally is that home dynamic expanded to broader society while maintaining the internal dynamics of one family.
Indeed, I want to point out to you that every dogmatic proponent of equality has been in favor of destroying the family. If you look at the literature, the really dedicated egalitarians have all protested against the family. They want to get the children out of the home at an early age, put them into community nurseries, raise them all the same, and so on. Why? Because the family is the true cement of the society. It's the true unit.
And this is going to have ripple effects throughout a lot of different issues. So the next one is the issue: how much control do you believe that society at large has over its circumstances? If you look at the two sets of parameters here, you're obviously going to get massively different answers. And I already talked about this in previous videos, but just to make it official, if you are in a situation where you believe that your tribe is a small piece of a much larger and brutal environment, you're not going to think you can do very much, even collectively as a whole, right? At least compared to someone that isn't really fully aware of that external world and also views the internal affairs as one big family. In that set of circumstances, it seems like you will have much more control over your circumstances. And so I've talked about the complete versus the limited, not so much exactly what the direct and indirect mean, but that'll come up in a later video. And I'm going to jump down here to the somewhere in the middle of the moral compass, because it's basically the same thing, just stated differently. And that is that the ambition, the level of ambition that each side has towards achieving its goals. And you may have even noticed this when studying the two different ideologies, but the left tends to be pretty idealist in its work, whereas the right, the conservatives, right, they just, it's not just being resistant to change. That's a little bit too oversimplified. It's really it's really just not sharing the same level of ambition. It's not as utopian. And then the next issue, and it's related as well. It's not as important overall for this discussion, but it's worth noting because it crops up occasionally. And that is that the perception of reality tends to be a bit different when you're in a bubble that's being protected versus, again, that, facing that external world. And that the right tends to be a bit more objective than the left. And I learned this more dealing not with the right, but with the left. Right. So when you get into these debates about postmodernism and, everything is subjective and all this stuff, it's not a coincidence that it's tied to left-wing ideologies as well. This is not really a big issue for the rest of this discussion most of the time, but it is worth noting because it is kind of connected to the last couple things I just said. Hi. So now I've isolated the patriarchy and set the matriarchy aside for now, because it is now time to get into the actual moral compass that emerges from these conditions. I can cover the two together, but I really got to dive into each one at a time. Okay, that was stupid. I meant I can cover the two sets of conditions together, but I need to cover each moral compass one at a time. Thank you. That's why this video is called the patriarchy, and I'll cover the matriarchy in the next video. So the reason why it splits at this juncture is that the next issue is, what is the imperative? What is the thing that is required of the patriarchy for the survival of the tribe? Right? So the key to this is to understand what I said earlier, which is protect the women and children. Right? So while it is true that women and children are inherently more important than you, there's more to the survival of the tribe than just giving birth, right? So there are all sorts of tasks that need to be done, and I'm not saying that they're all done by the men, of course. But many of these things that have to be done are difficult or dangerous. Difficult and or dangerous, right? So this is tied to the whole thing about it's the women that must survive. You don't want the women doing the dangerous tasks because, well, you can't afford the women dying, right? So the men are the ones that kind of have this sacrificial attitude about themselves, right? So the patriarchal attitude is task oriented. There's a bunch of things that need to be done. And by the way, it's kind of an interesting note. People tend to think that, the men did all this stuff. The men do the heavy lifting because they're the stronger ones, which is a pragmatic division of labor, sure, but it's kind of an interesting to note in the evolutionary sense that it was actually the reverse that started it, right? You by protecting the women in the first place and tasking the men to do the difficult things, the men actually evolve for the task, right? The men by facing the harsher Darwinian environment, and also with their seed being less valuable inherently than the eggs of a woman, right? The women can afford to make the sexual selection to favor specific genetic types. Those two factors then led to men being stronger than and faster than women, right? It's just kind of an interesting reversal of what people typically think. But anyway, in terms of the imperative of the patriarchy, there are all these other tasks, many of which are difficult and or dangerous, that must be done regardless of the fact that they are difficult and dangerous. So that is, right? So make yourself useful, okay? And it's this task-oriented nature, this imperative of the right wing that makes the moral structure of the patriarchy a verb-based moral compass. Bam! Now we have exactly what I analyzed in detail in part 4 of this series. That's why I made this video. I already wanted to have something explaining how a verb-based moral compass actually works. So now we can just dive right into how that shapes the patriarchy, okay? And actually, the next couple tests I just talked about too, so we can already get a head start on this. The next issue in the moral compass, I'm going to have to jump down here, but the next one I want to talk about is the concept of individual intrinsic value. What is your value as a person? And this is not something, just to clarify, does not mean in the religious sense, right, in terms of your soul or anything. This is all about the Darwinian model. It's a very practical thing, and it's something that I've been talking about here, right? And when you protect the women and children, as the men, as the patriarchy, you are tasked with this difficult stuff. So you have to, at least to some degree, internalize your own expendability. Right? When you're marching into the burning building, right, you're going to save, the women and children in the burning building. You yourself have to kind of already decide that you yourself inherently are not that valuable, right? It's all consistent with the same logic. So the patriarchy it does not, within itself, by the way, right? Obviously, you protect the women and children. They are more valuable than yourself, but we're talking about the patriarchy itself. So the men, how they view themselves and each other, right? So the women and children over there are more valuable than you, but among yourselves within your group, you don't view yourselves as having that same intrinsic value in this pragmatic sense as you do those people that are not operating in your paradigm. By contrast, your individual activity is of paramount importance. And this is actually, this is the thing that gives your whole life meaning. Your whole life is what you do. And you can actually see this, in the psychology of men in general, is, men value their work to the point where it defines their existence, right? Some men that lose their jobs commit suicide, even if they're financially okay. It's that their sense of self-worth goes away when they're not working. That's how deeply ingrained it is that the patriarchy values individual activity. So the next issue is, what is the goal of the patriarchy? And I mean this in terms of its own self-management, right? How it holds itself accountable to itself, right? So in terms of the task-oriented imperative, let's face it, some people are great at certain things, but other people are shit at those same things, right? So in terms of what I mean by the goal, how does the patriarchy determine whether itself is doing well? Well, it wants those tasks, it wants the right tasks to be done, and it wants them to be done by skilled people. It wants them to be done, efficiently, at lower cost, whatever, right? It wants the tasks to be done well, right? You can do the task well, you can do the task poorly. We'd rather it be done well, right? So I think that the best way to sum up this bullet point, the patriarchal goal fundamentally is quality control. It likes to have nice things. And so that ties into the next issue, which is the issue of progress, right? What is progress? Right? So you have a goal. So what does it mean to be moving toward that goal? That's what progress fundamentally means. And by the way, just to deviate really quickly, this term of progress, this has been in the culture war a huge loss for the right for a very long time. They let the left take this word completely for themselves. They should never have done that. Progress is not exclusively a left-wing concept. And so you end up with, radical compromisers stepping in and saying, well, you got the left wants progress and the right wants to hold everything back. And so the answer is somewhere in the middle. No, I already addressed the pragmatic versus idealist thing, but what it actually is that the two sides have different views of what progress is. And I will, actually, let me say what I think the progress is according to the right, and then I'll finish this point. And what it is fundamentally, in light of this quality control, progress according to that metric is increasing the average. I said it, and it's absolute. And by absolute, I mean like in the mathematical sense, like absolute value, right? So in magnitude or in quantity or in quality, right? So what this is, absolute here, is the opposite of relative. Okay, so it's in a standalone sense rather than in a comparative sense, right? So like one way you can think about it is, imagine just being stranded on a desert island, right? So, the first day you're shipwrecked or whatever, you have no shelter. But then you build a shelter. Well, so on day one, you didn't have a shelter, and day two, you did have a shelter. That's progress. Well, that's not progress in a relative sense because you didn't have anyone else to compare to. But you did, the progress is measured along the timeline. You compare yourself where you are now to where you were yesterday. Are you better off than where you personally were before? That's what progress means in the absolute sense, right? So collectively, if people are generally better in the absolute sense today than they were yesterday, then you've increased the average and you have progress in the absolute sense. And so I do attribute this type of progress to the right for two basic reasons. One is that I can work out the logic of the verb-based patriarchal moral compass in the way I just did, but the other is that any discussions I've ever had with the left, they seem nearly or totally tone deaf to this concept. They think all progress is relative, but I don't want to get into that until the next video. And that ties into one of the things that I mentioned in previous videos, which is that the external affairs mindset does not see the economy as a zero-sum game. I mean, you're going to have to not see it that way. In order for the concept of increasing the average to make any sense at all, you have to see. You can't simultaneously view everything as being a zero-sum game, because that would mean that the average would be a constant. So it's an any-sum game. That's a little bit of an abstract term, so I also added mutual benefit there just to clarify that would be the goal, because mutual benefit would be a positive-sum game, right? If I win and you win, then that is a positive-sum game, but the economy isn't necessarily a positive-sum game. It can also be a negative-sum game. You can also assure mutual destruction. The point is that there's no restriction that this mindset has as to economic affairs, right? Things can get, for the entire society, it can progress, right? It can increase the average, or it can decrease the average. You can have everything collapse, right? I think everybody knows to some degree that this is, I mean, obviously if we get struck by a meteor, it's gonna, that kills us all, and that's definitely a negative sum game. But in terms of just an intuitive calculation of just how human affairs generally work, I think that this is more borne in mind constantly in this mindset, because the whole focus is increasing the quality in the first place. So in terms of self-management, how does the patriarchy facilitate progress over time? Well, it's actually quite simple to reason it out from everything here. It's a verb-based moral compass, right? It's focused on tasks, it's focused on actions, right? So how do you ensure progress over time? Well, you reward the good actions and you punish the bad actions, right? If someone either does a really good thing, you reward them with some honor and medal, or give them a pay increase or whatever, right? Either they do the right thing or they do the job that they were tasked with very well, right? You reward them, right? If they do something that's bad, then you punish that behavior. It's simple. Everybody knows this, right? But the point is that this comes from the verb-based moral compass. You have to believe that morality is fundamentally rooted in actions, which, interestingly enough, it requires that means justify the ends moral compass to start with. So now I think we have enough information on this chart for me to offer up a summary of the patriarchal right-wing moral compass, or at least an analogy. Take it or leave it. If it is a bit too abstract, you can definitely use this as a more concrete way to do the calculation, as long as you understand its limitations, because it isn't perfect. But a reasonable summary or analogy of this moral compass is sports. Sports are a great oversimplified example of how this entire moral compass works, because it is itself task oriented, right? Put the ball in the goal, right? Run around the bases, whatever it is, there's a certain task and there is a natural quality control process to it, right? So if I hire some athletes to kick the ball in the goal, right, then you hire athletes on the other team and they're better and they're able to stop me, then I got to either hire new athletes or get these guys to practice. And, so there's a natural quality control way to increase the quality of the sport. But you can't just let, the athletes do anything on the field, right? If all the athletes kick each other in the shins, that might work in the short run, but at the end of the day, you just have a bunch of injured athletes and the quality of the sport goes down, right? So in order to actually assure the quality increase, you must reward good behavior, but also punish bad behavior, right? It's the way sports are officiated. You got to call fouls and things like that. And the reason why this is a great analogy is that sports themselves are actually simulated warfare, right? That's where sports came from, right? The earliest sports were all violent, right? I mean, yeah, there were gladiators, but you can't have, everybody kill each other or you just don't have an army, right? I don't know exactly how they regulated it, but this is fundamentally where it all comes from. So this is a good oversimplified way to see it in action. And so I guess I will say that this is why I found it especially strange, the political direction that many sports have taken this year. Because, let me put it this way, just because your team gets called for a bunch of fouls disproportionately, it doesn't necessarily mean the game was rigged. Maybe it was, but also maybe it wasn't. Maybe you just committed more fouls. Athletes generally understand this, but now all of a sudden they all kneel for Black Lives Matter, which that whole movement is founded on that fallacy. So I don't know, they got to figure that out. But also the limitations on this analogy, I guess there's a couple points. One is that it is sports are fundamentally a zero-sum game, or rather a win-lose game, right? Whereas obviously right here in the economy, it's an any-sum game. So you don't necessarily have that. And it's the other thing is that sports are typically just two teams, right? It's just us and them, right? In the economy, there are way more actors, right? So it's way more actors and not necessarily zero-sum games. But if you reason how actions are officiated with the goal of quality control, as long as you understand that caveat, the sports analogy usually works pretty well. So in light of sports, the next thing we can fill out on this chart is your individual moral status. On one play, you can be the hero, but then on the next play, you can be the one that blew it, right? So the way society views you, if you're judged on your actions, you might be, what have you done for me lately? Your status in that regard is going to change. Now, it's interesting to note that by contrast, the patriarchy also tends to view human nature as static. And these are interesting, not just because they're opposites, but because I also think they're related. Because while it is generally true that your moral status is dynamic, you'll notice that the right also tends to believe in the death penalty, right? So why is this? And I think this is that you answer it by looking at these two in tandem, right? So here's how I think the right kind of understands morality. So you got a static human nature. You can either yourself be a bad person. This is the bad side. This is the good side over here, right? So you can either be a bad person doing bad things, or you can be a good person doing good things, right? But we can't actually see who you are. Rather, you use your actions as kind of a window into your soul, right? It's because if you're, this caliber of a person, you're expected to commit actions kind of in a band along this range, right? You're not expected to really, wander outside it too much. We kind of know who you are, right? So you're going to commit actions kind of in this range, or if you're over here, you're going to commit them in this range, right? So generally, things can be forgivable, right? You'll do better. But if you've done an action that is just so heinous, just way over here, that's kind of a window into your soul that your static nature that isn't going to change is going to be somewhere over here. That's just going to be so bad that you're basically irredeemable, and the only way to assure quality control is just to get rid of you. At least that's kind of how I understand it. Maybe that's wrong, but that's my analysis on that one. So the next concept is, who is the recipient of responsibility? Now, what the hell is that? Now, this whole concept might seem a little strange in this context. It'll really only start to make sense when compared to the matriarchy. But the idea is, who is on the receiving end of society's response to your role, I guess. I don't know how to put it abstractly that works in all the cases, but the answer to this one is that it's the same party as the actor, right? That's what it means, is that whatever I do, like if I score a touchdown, then the 6 points are added to my stats as well as to my team's score. We receive the benefit or the punishment of our actions, right? We are the same party that receives, fundamentally, as it's the same party as the actor. Whatever. It seems a bit weird tautological. Why make a separate line for it? It'll make sense later. So there's enough here to where I think I can reveal this line now. I think overall this is a good description for this paradigm. Maybe you'll like this better than sports as a mere analogy, but I think that it's decent to describe the political right as the ideology of self-sufficiency. You can see that it's just another way of stating the same thing, right? Right from the beginning, right? We're a community of independent families. Yeah, we're a community, we're friendly to one another, but we're still responsible for ourselves, right? This is all on the chart already. I think probably the best example, or at least a really good example of the spirit of this, is the U.S. Constitution, honestly. The Second Amendment, right? You are responsible for your own defense. That's really what the spirit of the Second Amendment is, by the way, is that the castle doctrine and all that kind of stuff. It's that as you're responsible for yourself, right? And yeah, as that independent family, I've already said it. I guess there's not really that much more to add at this point. But I think that sums it up pretty well, at least in terms of kind of the attitude of people that identify with, right wing or conservative or whatever, is that they do see, people as responsible for themselves. And another consequence of, I guess, the sports ethics, the verb-based moral compass. This is actually something, I think I even referenced it in an earlier video here. The next one is time perspective. Okay, so I think I said this before, is that, we as opportunistic creatures kind of look around and see what everyone else is getting away with, and that sets a precedent for what we can do. And likewise, if we're supposed to be leaders, people see what we do and then they will copy that, right? Or, it doesn't even have to be a leader, right? It can be that if that other kid cheated in class and got away with it, then maybe I can cheat too, which is why it has to be punished and punished quickly, because if you let it fester, then it spreads, right? Because it's critical who sees the cheating kid first, right? If it's the teacher, then you can put a stop to it. If it's the other kid, then they start, then it becomes a bigger problem. Right, so that's kind of the battle there. But either way, the battle is over the long-term precedent. This is why people develop with a really sharp sensitivity to what other people are getting away with, because they have that precedent. Like, what if people were allowed to get away with that long term, right? So the right wing tends to take that long term view, I mean, that's what sports is. When you have a rule book, it's going to be, the rules are going to be enforced the entire game, right? But then if a ref makes a call early on that, is controversial, you kind of expect, if you're calling a foul and it seemed like nothing happened, well, if that foul went against me, you better call it in my favor, right? When the situation arises the other way, right? So whatever happens sets a precedent, and that's why they're very sensitive to events, not just for the moment, but also for the long term. Just got a couple more here. The next one is the concept of fairness. Now, in terms of the language battle, this is another one that the right has completely lost on unnecessarily. The left thinks that it is the only one that has any concept of fairness, but once again, no. Both sides have different concepts of fairness, and this is actually, when they admit it, this is one that they actually feel very strongly about, and it has to do, it's just part and parcel of verb-based moral compass and everything else in between here. The right hates double standards. Absolutely hates double standards. It's directly, like I just stated about the sports example. If you're going to call it one way against me right now, you got to call it that same way when the same situation in reverse. It's exactly the same thing, because otherwise you're setting a precedent of a double standard, which is just, well, it's very damaging, right? Because you're going to lower the quality of the activity if you're allowing one person to get away with something that the other person can't get away with, right? So so then the whole system comes into question, right? If supposedly the means are to reward good behavior and punish bad behavior, as soon as there's a double standard is a crack in that wall, right? Because now there's no meaning to the term good behavior or bad behavior. You're not even prioritizing the action anymore, right? So you're getting away from quality control and all this. So the right is very sensitive to double standards. It hates it, but it needs to understand that it's the only side that actually cares about this. You think that it's common sense, everybody believes it, it's a centrist position. No, it's the verb-based moral compass. It's this paradigm. Right, you're the only side that really cares about this, and you need to understand that. So yeah, fairness means call the game evenly. So the last one I have for you in this chart in this video is the concept of self-restraint. And the right, the patriarchy, exercises self-restraint according to a code of honor. Now, this is inspired by several rows in the chart, but the most basic one you can look at is the one at the very top. The patriarchy understands that we are on the precipice of savagery. Okay, so just imagine back to the old Darwinian paradigm. You're training your army, you got a wrestling competition, whatever. It's possible that your winner, your Andre the Giant, could easily overpower the ref, right? This is the same spirit as whichever one it was before. Oh yeah, you can't have the athletes kicking each other in the shins. This is the same kind of thing. You definitely can't have them kicking the ref, right? You might, in the short run, again, you care about long-term precedent. That's the point. You might, in the short run, get what you want. But in the long run, everything's going to fall apart. You're not actually going to have, right? In order to ensure quality control and secure that long-term precedent, there has to be some degree of self-restraint, because you, as one of the players that really wants to get the ball in the goal by any means necessary, you need to restrain yourself and recognize that you can't actually do that. Right? You need to stay within the rules. There is a broader spirit of self-restraint within the rules, though. You then want to do whatever it takes to get the job done, right? There's two sides to this. There's the self-restraint out here, but then within the rules, do whatever you need to, right? You want to capture both spirits, but you need to do that really because, yes, you are that thin blue line, I guess, between quality assurance and total savagery and collapse. So you got to understand both those levels, and that is exactly what that code of honor is supposed to manage. So that's my overview of the patriarchy. I reserve the right to edit it as necessary. I'm already thinking I might want to move ideology up a bit, maybe reword some things. This is a work in progress, but I think this is a really good start. Obviously, I haven't displayed all the items on it yet. You got that weird suspicious gap in the middle. I'll get to that soon. But yeah, this is all I'm going to cover on it today. I guess the final word I have to say about this is that this is the side of the political aisle that is currently under attack. I think that this is due to a bunch of different factors. I think one of them is just losing the language battle, but also it's under attack by people who just don't understand it. I mean, it's an absolute sham that somehow this is associated with the German National Socialist Workers' Party of the 1930s. This has absolutely nothing to do with that. At best, you could argue that the Nazis were a twisted form of quality control, but even then, it wasn't based on action, so it's not really. Let's try to identify what real people in the real world actually think, instead of these ridiculous, twisted caricatures by smooth-brained idiots who don't actually understand philosophy or history. Okay, this is actually a very reasonable set of beliefs, and quite honestly, it's actually a necessary set of beliefs. There are actually a lot of good values and perspectives here that you really should not just throw into the trash. But I'll get into the matriarchy and the comparisons between the two later. I think this will suffice to say for now. I hope you found it helpful, reasonable. Please give critiques. I'll expand on it and make corrections as necessary. So I will see you next time. Oh, actually, I do want to add one more thing. If you do find these ideas reasonable, but find yourself hesitant to attribute them exclusively to the patriarchy, just wait until I explain how the matriarchy works and we compare just how entirely different the two are. Okay? Once you get the internal logic of both and compare, then we can decide whether these things can be expanded to more centrist ideas or if it really is just stemming from this archetype. But until then, just wait.